Lift your hands wherever you are. This is not an ordinary Friday. The Lord woke you up today with an instruction, with an agenda, with a supernatural program written in the Spirit long before your alarm ever rang. I hear the Lord saying, this Friday I'm shifting what has refused to move. I am opening what has stayed locked, and I am releasing what has been delayed. Somebody, your Friday will not be ordinary. As you step into this early morning prayer, every atmosphere around you is aligning with the word of the Lord. Something is about to break loose in your life. I don't know who needs this, but the Lord says this is your Friday of divine interruption. Everything that has been fighting your advancement, everything that has been resisting your lifting, everything that has been draining your strength, this morning it bows. This morning it scatters. This morning it gives way. You have cried long enough. You have carried burdens long enough. But as you engage this prayer, grace is entering your power, is entering your situation. Heaven is responding to your name. Lift your expectation, because God is not just visiting you, He is settling you. He is settling that battle, settling that diagnosis, settling that financial storm, settling that family issue. I feel a shift already. What God is about to release over you this morning will rewrite your Friday, your weekend, and even your destiny. Get ready, because as you pray, evidence will rise, testimonies will rise, joy will rise, and your long-awaited lifting will not be postponed. Today, the supernatural becomes your reality. When we talk about God releasing a divine shift, we are not talking about something shallow or emotional. We are speaking about a deep spiritual movement that begins quietly in the unseen realm and then manifests loudly in the physical. A divine shift is when God steps into the ordinary rhythm of your life and changes the direction of events, outcomes, and possibilities. It is when what was once blocked begins to open, when what was once delayed begins to accelerate, and when the weight of resistance that once held you down begins to lose its grip. This kind of shift does not depend on your strength, your status, or your strategy. It depends only on God deciding that the appointed time has come. And when God announces an appointed time, nothing in the universe has the authority to oppose it. On this Friday, the Lord is not just suggesting change. He is commanding change. He is initiating a divine shift specifically designed for your advancement. A shift from God is gentle but powerful. It may come softly like the morning breeze, yet it carries the force to move mountains you have been trying to push for years. It comes with a peace that begins to calm the storms inside you before it ever touches the storms around you. You might feel it first in your spirit as a sense of release, a sense that the pressure you've been under is no longer crushing you, but loosening its hold. It could feel like clarity returning, like hope waking up, like a new breath entering your chest after a long season of heaviness. God's shifts often begin inside you before they show up in your circumstances, because He aligns your spirit to receive the very things He is about to place in your hands. When He says a shift is coming, it means resistance is losing power and the hand of the Lord is becoming the dominant force over your life again. For many people listening, there have been delays that seemed endless. You've watched others move ahead, progress, rise, and walk into the very things you've been praying for. You've wondered if perhaps your own season had been forgotten, or if something about you disqualified you from divine intervention. But a shift from God has nothing to do with human comparison or timing. He does not follow your calendar, and He does not measure your life by the speed or success of others. When God releases a divine shift, He rewrites the spiritual timeline of your life. He pulls you out of the waiting room and places you into the fulfillment room. He accelerates what was slow, restores what was broken, and reconnects what was scattered. Every delay that tried to convince you that God was silent or far from you becomes the very place where his power now chooses to speak the loudest. There are places in your life where things have been locked opportunities, locked favor, locked conversations, locked finances, locked relationships, locked progress. You have stood before doors that refused to open, no matter how much faith you had or how many prayers you prayed. But a divine shift means God takes the key himself. When he opens a door, no human can shut it. When he unlocks a path, no darkness can block it. When he declares access, no resistance can deny it. Every spiritual lock that kept you in the same place is now subject to the authority of God's voice. This Friday becomes a moment when God announces that your season of standing still has expired. He begins to open places that were once inaccessible to you, and you start to see movement where there was only stagnation. Resistance has been a loud companion for many. The resistance from the enemy, the resistance from circumstances, the resistance from fear, the resistance from your own thoughts. It can feel heavy to constantly push against something that never seems to move. But when God releases a divine shift, resistance loses its purpose. It loses its ability to intimidate. The Lord begins to dismantle everything that was working against you. Things that once felt impossible begin to feel light. Burdens that once felt unbearable begin to weaken. Attacks that once felt threatening begin to lose their sting. A divine shift reverses the power dynamics in your life. The enemy no longer pushes you, you begin to push back. The situation no longer overwhelms you, you begin to stand over it with renewed confidence. There is something peaceful about knowing that God himself has decided to intervene. You do not have to fight the same battles in the same way. You do not have to carry the same weight you carried yesterday. You do not have to walk through today with the same exhaustion that followed you through the week. A divine shift brings rest even before it brings results. It gives your heart room to breathe, room to hope, room to trust again. It reminds you that you were never meant to carry everything on your own. God is not just shifting things around you, he is shifting things within you. The fear that kept you silent is loosening. The doubt that kept you hesitant is dissolving. The anxiety that kept you tense is lifting. He is realigning your inner world so that when the outer shift begins, you are ready to hold it without collapsing. Many people underestimate how much spiritual pressure they have been under. They underestimate the battles they've endured quietly, the nights they stayed awake, the prayers they whispered, the tears they wiped away before anyone noticed. But God sees all of it. He counts every tear and measures every burden. A divine shift does not come randomly. It comes when heaven decides you have carried enough. It comes when the weight of your experience has prepared you for the blessing that is now coming. It comes when the struggle has refined your character enough to carry the breakthrough without losing yourself. A shift does not come to interrupt your life. It comes to elevate it. There is a supernatural gentleness in the way God moves. He does not rush. He does not force. He does not overwhelm. He guides, he nudges, he whispers, and yet the effect of his movement is undeniable. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to notice signs around you that confirm something is changing. You begin to experience unexpected favor, unexpected clarity, unexpected alignment. People who never noticed you suddenly pay attention. Situations that were frozen suddenly begin to thaw. God begins to gather the pieces of your life that seemed scattered and brings them into divine order. A shift is not chaos, it is clarity. It is the moment God replaces disorder with direction. You might feel like your journey has been slow, but a divine shift accelerates the pace. What would have taken months can happen in days. What would have taken years can happen in moments. God specializes in sudden movements, moments where everything changes, and you cannot explain how. All you know is that something that was impossible yesterday is unfolding today. The shift is not only spiritual, it becomes practical. Circumstances begin to rearrange themselves. People begin to respond differently. Opportunities begin to open. You begin to see progress in places where you once only saw pain. A divine shift also brings healing. Healing from disappointment, healing from betrayal, healing from fear. The wounds that you have carried silently begin to close. The emotions you buried begin to settle. You begin to feel stronger, anchored, grounded. God is not just shifting your situation, He's shifting you into a healthier, calmer, more stable version of yourself. You begin to understand that every delay had a purpose. Every closed door had protection inside it. Every season of waiting was shaping something valuable in you. The shift God brings is not shallow. It is deep, meaningful transformation that touches your spirit, your mind, and your surroundings. When God decides to shift something, you cannot stop it. The enemy cannot stop it. Circumstances cannot stop it. Human opinions cannot stop it. Even your own mistakes cannot stop it. God moves with finality. What He begins, He sustains. What He initiates, He completes. This Friday becomes a marker in the spirit, a moment where God announces that a season of heaviness is giving birth to a season of movement, a season of clarity, a season of answered prayer, a season of divine alignment. A divine shift brings you back into the center of God's plan, where everything begins to flow again with grace and ease. The shift God is releasing over your life is not loud or forceful. It is gentle, calming, reassuring. It touches your heart before it touches your circumstances. It brings peace before it brings manifestation. It prepares you inwardly before it promotes you outwardly. And as you receive this shift, everything around you begins to align. Everything that once resisted begins to give way. Everything that once delayed begins to accelerate. Everything that once locked begins to open. God is releasing a divine shift this Friday that will break delays, open locked places, and overturn every resistance working against your advancement. When we say this early morning prayer activates supernatural settlement, we are speaking about a holy moment where heaven leans close to the earth and God personally steps into the matters that have weighed on your heart for far too long. Supernatural settlement means God is not just listening, He is intervening. He is not just observing, He is acting. He is not just comparting, He is correcting, adjusting, restoring, and resolving things at a level you could never reach with your own strength. There are situations that human wisdom cannot untangle, problems human effort cannot fix, and battles human courage cannot conquer. But when God steps in, the atmosphere shifts instantly. Burdens begin to lighten, the noise of the battle begins to quiet down, and peace begins to rise inside your heart. This prayer becomes a gateway, a spiritual doorway through which the presence of God enters and begins to establish order where there has been chaos. Supernatural settlement is not an emotional feeling. It is a divine process. It is when God takes the broken pieces of your life and puts them back in order with his own hands. It is when he looks at the confusion and disorder around you and begins to reorganize everything in the rhythm of his perfect will. Some of you have been fighting the same battles over and over, circling the same challenges, dealing with the same patterns of delay, disappointment, or spiritual opposition. Settlement means God decides the battle is over. It means he draws the line, declares the end, and positions you on the other side of the struggle. It is God telling every storm, peace, be still. And when God speaks those words, they do not rise from human authority. They rise from eternal power. They silence everything that has been resisting you. There are issues that have followed you for years. Family challenges, financial instability, health conditions, emotional wounds, spiritual battles that never seem to fully break. But settlement means God is not only solving the issue, he is removing its root. He does not do temporary repairs, he does permanent restoration. He reaches into the places you cannot even articulate in prayer. The hidden corners of your spirit where pain quietly lives, and he begins to apply his healing. The kind of settlement God brings touches the surface, but also penetrates the depths. It deals with physical needs, emotional burdens, spiritual battles, and generational patterns all at once. When God settles something, he settles it completely. As you enter early morning prayer, you enter a time when the spiritual atmosphere is clear, when the noise of the world is still, and when your heart can receive what God wants to release. Morning prayers are not just routines. They are spiritual transactions. They are moments where heaven records your cry and returns answers wrapped in divine timing. The calmness of the early morning becomes the very place where God begins to shift outcomes. Supernatural settlement often begins in stillness. It starts with a whisper from God, a reassurance that he has taken over the matter you have been wrestling with. And though your situation may not change instantly, your spirit feels the first wave of peace, the first sign that something beyond your understanding is already in motion. There is a peace that comes with settlement. A peace that does not come from the absence of problems, but from the presence of God inside the situation. It is the peace that tells you, you are not fighting this anymore. God is. It is the peace that quiets your thoughts, slows your breathing, and reminds you that you are held by a strength greater than anything rising against you. When God settles your matter, fear loses its grip. Worry loses its authority. Anxiety loses its voice. You begin to sense a calmness deep within you. A calmness that cannot be shaken even when circumstances still appear uncertain. This is the peace that surpasses understanding. The peace that only God can give. Supernatural settlement also means God is correcting imbalances. There are places where you gave more than you received, where you invested but did not harvest, where you served but were not valued, where you tried but saw no results. Settlement means God is restoring divine balance. He repays what was lost. He restores what was stolen. He replaces what was broken. He honors what was ignored. The scales of your life begin to shift into alignment, not because you fought harder, but because God stepped in to defend and establish you. Settlement means God becomes your advocate, your defender, your restorer, your reward. Many people carry burdens silently. They smile on the outside but hurt deeply on the inside. They function daily but without ease, without joy, without rest. Settlement means God is giving you relief, not temporary comfort, but lasting relief. The kind that makes you exhale after years of holding your breath. The kind that loosens the knot in your chest. The kind that makes you feel light again, hopeful again, alive again. The battles that drained you begin to lose strength. The battles that intimidated you begin to fade. You are no longer surviving. You are beginning to rise. When God decides to settle a matter, he steps into the timeline of your life with precision. What seemed delayed suddenly arrives. What seemed lost suddenly returns. What seemed broken suddenly repairs. What seemed impossible suddenly shifts into motion. God does not operate in confusion. He brings clarity, direction, and purposeful movement. Supernatural settlement means clarity begins to surround you. You start seeing solutions instead of problems. You start sensing direction instead of hesitation. You start feeling confidence instead of fear. Things that once felt complicated begin to simplify under the hand of God. Supernatural settlement also brings alignment with destiny. When chaos is removed, clarity returns. When battles end, progress begins. God settles your heart so he can settle your path. He calms your inner storm so he can clear your outer path. You begin to sense where you are being led, who you are becoming, and what God is preparing for you. Settlement positions you for the next season. It stabilizes your spirit. It restores your focus. It strengthens your faith. You start to move with purpose again, not behind the weight of anxiety, but under the peace of God's guidance. There are relationships that need settlement, relationships that were damaged by misunderstanding, separation, or lack of healing. Settlement means God is touching hearts. He is restoring communication where silence ruled. He is rebuilding trust where pain lived. He is bringing understanding where confusion lingered. God's settlement works in ways we cannot even imagine, reaching places human words and human effort could never reach. He softens hearts. He redirects intentions. He heals wounds that time alone could not heal. There are financial matters that need settlement. For some, it has felt like you are always building, but never seeing the fruit, as if there is always something draining what you earn. Settlement means God is lifting the invisible weight that has been sitting over your resources. It means favor begins to flow again. It means opportunities open with ease. It means the cycle of loss breaks. God begins to reposition you financially in a way that brings stability and rest. Not sudden riches, but steady provision, steady progress, steady increase. The kind of settlement that brings dignity back to your life, where you no longer live under constant pressure, but under divine supply. Supernatural settlement brings closure. Holy closure. There are things you have held onto because you didn't know how to release them. People who left your life without explanation. Seasons that ended without clarity. Pain that lingered because the story felt unfinished. Settlement means God writes the final word. He gives you peace where there was confusion. He gives you understanding where there was hurt. He gives you acceptance where there was struggle. He closes doors gently so you can walk into the future without dragging the past behind you. When God steps into your battles, the atmosphere of your life changes. Strength rises again. Hope rises again. Joy rises again. You begin to see signs that God is handling things. You begin to notice that what once overwhelmed you is losing power. You begin to feel steady even while waiting. Supernatural settlement creates a foundation under your feet, a foundation you can stand on without fear of collapse. It is God telling you you are safe now. It is God telling you you are covered now. It is God telling you the battle has turned. The beauty of settlement is that it is not loud. It does not always come with signs and wonders in the sky. It often comes quietly. You wake up one morning and realize your heart feels lighter. You walk through your day and realize the fear is gone. You speak about your future and realize hope has returned. Settlement begins in the spirit before it manifests in your reality. It is God placing his hand on your life and calming everything that has been restless. Early morning prayer is powerful because it opens your spirit before the world opens its noise. It gives God the first room in your day, the first conversation, the first silence, the first focus. And in that stillness, God begins to settle things. You may not feel it all at once, but shifts begin to happen. The atmosphere around you begins to soften. The heaviness begins to lift. Your heart begins to rest. Supernatural settlement is God stepping into the battles, burdens, and long-standing issues of your life to rewrite your story with evidence and testimony.